Judge cites FBI report in Trump filing drama. Legal pressure spikes. What's next? It was around 3:17 p.m. ET when the courtroom mood reportedly shifted in a way few people expected. According to observers watching the docket like a hawk, a judge appeared to reference an FBI report inside a fresh Trump-related filing, quietly, almost clinically. Yet the ripple effect allegedly hit Washington like a siren. Not because anyone proved anything, not because a verdict appeared, but because that single citation, if reports are accurate, may have changed the framing of the entire legal fight around Trump. Sources claim DOJ-connected legal watchers immediately began asking a sharper question. Why is the court looking at that FBI report now? Capitol Hill staffers, according to multiple accounts, allegedly started whispering about hearings, subpoenas, and an escalation loop that could drag Congress, the White House, and the courts into one brutal showdown. And Trump, still the center of gravity, was suddenly back in the crosshairs of the country's most powerful institutions. Because if this citation means what some officials believe it could mean, then this isn't just another filing. It's a pressure spike, a warning flare, a potential turning point. And what happened next was even more dangerous than anyone expected. This story feels national level serious, according to analysts, because it appears to sit at the crossroads of law, legitimacy, and institutional trust. And those are the three things that tend to break first when a political system starts wobbling. In normal times, a court citation is just a citation. But in the Trump era, observers often describe the legal system as a second battlefield, one that can spill into elections, markets, and foreign policy overnight. If a judge is citing an FBI report in a Trump filing, some legal watchers believe it could signal one of several high-stakes possibilities. The court may be weighing credibility disputes in a more formal way. The court may be tracking a timeline question that could reshape key arguments. The court may be responding to DOJ pressure, even indirectly, by narrowing what counts as reliable. And if any of those interpretations are even partly true, the escalation risks multiply, because Trump's opponents could treat the citation as a green light to push harder. Trump's allies could treat it as proof the system is targeting him. Congress could treat it as a justification to investigate the investigators, and the White House, according to some observers, could feel forced into a damage control posture, whether it wants to or not. Some officials reportedly fear the next 48 to 72 hours could become a sprint. Emergency motions, rapid hearings, off-camera negotiations, and loud media warfare. The stakes aren't just Trump's personal fortunes. The stakes could include confidence in the DOJ, trust in the FBI, stability of the courts, and even economic calm if investors interpret the chaos as a sign of prolonged instability. This is bigger than Trump, and if it escalates, it could reshape everything. To the citizens who have felt powerless watching institutions fight like rival armies, to the people who feel like they're always the last ones to learn the truth, to anyone who has ever thought, none of this will touch me. Stay with me, because stories like this rarely stay contained. Even if every detail remains unconfirmed, the reaction alone can reshape real life. When the DOJ and courts collide publicly, businesses get cautious. When Congress threatens oversight warfare, budgets get delayed. When markets sense instability, prices can move. When foreign rivals think America is distracted, they can test boundaries, whether that involves NATO tensions, trade threats, or diplomatic pressure points. And when the country's most powerful agencies get pulled into political combat, the public trust that holds everything together can start to crack. You don't need to love Trump to be affected by a Trump-centered crisis. You don't need to hate Trump to feel the fallout, because when the system fights itself, ordinary people often absorb the damage. Uncertainty, fear, and the feeling that nobody is in control. So we're going to break this down clearly. No confusing legal words, no partisan screaming, just what the citation might signal, how the pressure could escalate, and why the next steps might be the part nobody is ready for, because the real question isn't what happened yesterday, it's what happens next. According to longtime court watchers, The Trump legal universe has operated like a storm system for years, sometimes calm at the surface, sometimes violent, always unpredictable. And the warning signs, as many observers describe them, didn't begin today. They built slowly, month after month, filing after filing, statement after statement. The backdrop, according to analysts, is a country already exhausted by institutional conflict. The DOJ under political suspicion, the FBI under public scrutiny, Congress struggling to govern, and courts forced into the center of national drama. Within that environment, Trump remains the most powerful accelerant. When Trump speaks, allies mobilize. When Trump is attacked, opponents escalate. And when Trump is touched by legal pressure, the institutions around him start behaving like they're preparing for impact. Court filings in this context aren't just paperwork. They are signals. They can shape public perception, influence fundraising, trigger congressional moves, and even alter foreign policy messaging if adversaries interpret America as unstable. Sources claim tensions have been building around a few repeating patterns. Timeline battles, Trump-related cases, according to legal analysts, often turn on what was known when it was known and what actions followed. Credibility warfare. Both sides, according to observers, tend to fight over whose evidence counts as real, whose witnesses matter, and whose interpretation wins. Institutional retaliation fear. Some officials reportedly worry that if one side appears to win, the other side responds by weaponizing Congress, media, or agency oversight. Shutdown and funding leverage. Capitol Hill veterans sometimes warn that when legal drama heats up, budget tools can become weapons. Shutdown threats can appear as bargaining chips. International pressure. Some national security watchers argue that internal chaos invites external testing, trade threats, tariff shock talk, NATO-strained narratives, and diplomatic pressure campaigns. This was coming for months, according to observers, because each smaller conflict left behind one unresolved question. What happens when the courts don't just process the Trump storm, but become part of it? That's why the phrase "Judge cites FBI report" is so combustible. Because if the court is citing it, the court is acknowledging it. And if the court is acknowledging it, legal pressure can harden into something more dangerous than headlines. It can become institutional momentum. And once momentum takes hold, stopping it is the hardest part. But then something happened that nobody saw coming. The first tremor, according to court watchers, the day began with routine docket checks. Most filings, they claim, looked procedural, but early chatter, as some observers describe it, suggested that a new Trump filing contained language that felt sharper than usual, almost as if both sides expected a collision. Some analysts reportedly noticed a line referencing investigative materials, which they believed could include FBI documentation. At the time, it was only a suspicion. But suspicion in Washington spreads fast, and then the phones started buzzing. DOJ attention reportedly tightened. Sources claim that by mid-morning, DOJ-linked legal observers were paying closer attention than usual, not because of a press release, not because of a dramatic announcement, but because, according to those sources, the filing structure hinted that someone expected the court to weigh specific investigative material more seriously. Some officials allegedly worried about a familiar problem. If the court starts treating a particular FBI report as relevant, it could tilt the battlefield. Even if nothing is proven, relevance can create momentum, and momentum can produce consequences. Capitol hallway anxiety. In a Capitol hallway, according to multiple accounts, staffers were seen moving with that unmistakable "something's coming" energy. A senator's aide allegedly said quietly, "This might blow up." Another reportedly asked, "Do we have talking points?" Some offices, according to observers, began discussing oversight options, hearings, subpoenas, requests for agency briefings, and somewhere in those whispered conversations, a phrase allegedly surfaced, "If the judge is citing it, we can't ignore it." That's when the story began to feel like more than a court case. It began to feel like a multi-institution standoff. But wait, Here's where it gets even darker. A judge's calendar becomes the story. According to court watchers, the judge's schedule suddenly mattered. People weren't just tracking the filing, they were tracking when the judge would address it, even indirectly. Because in a high-pressure Trump case, silence can be interpreted as strategy, and a brief mention can be interpreted as a warning. Reports suggest attorneys began texting each other questions like, is the court going to cite investigative material? Is there an FBI document referenced? Is the judge signaling credibility concerns? Nothing was confirmed, but the anxiety was real. The briefing room grows tense. By early afternoon, reporters reportedly sensed a shift. They didn't have the full story. They didn't have official confirmation, but they saw patterns, hurried conversations, nervous smiles, people checking phones again and again. A producer, according to one account, allegedly said, "It feels like the system is tightening." And then an observer claimed someone whispered the phrase that would define the day: FBI report. Not shouted, whispered. The moment everything changed. This is the timestamp that keeps coming up. According to observers, this is the moment a judge appeared to cite an FBI report in connection with the Trump filing drama. It may not have been theatrical, it may not have been dramatic, but it was enough. Sources claim that once the citation was noticed, the tone shifted across multiple centers of power. Legal teams allegedly began drafting fast responses. DOJ-linked watchers reportedly started assessing what the court might do next. Congressional offices allegedly prepared for potential public demands. Media outlets reportedly moved from watching to mobilizing. If this citation is real, some legal analysts believe it could mean the court is treating the FBI's summary of interviews, evidence, or investigative steps as part of the formal record that matters. And when that happens, the fight changes shape. Now, it's not just lawyers arguing, it's institutions reacting. And that's when everything shifted. Trump world allegedly enters rapid response mode. Sources claim Trump's team began reacting quickly, not necessarily with one unified plan, but with competing instincts. Some advisors, according to observers, allegedly wanted to go on offense, call it political, call it biased, call it a setup. Others reportedly advised restraint, wait for clarity, don't amplify the document. Don't lock yourself into one narrative. That internal split, as analysts often note, can be dangerous because it creates inconsistent messaging. And inconsistent messaging can be exploited in court and in Congress. But then something happened that nobody saw coming. Rumors of a second document, according to sources familiar with legal chatter, whispers started spreading about a second piece of material. Not necessarily a new FBI report, but potentially an attachment, a reference, or a follow-up summary. The details reportedly remained unclear, but the psychological effect was instant, because one citation can be dismissed as routine. Two references begin to look like a pattern, and patterns in political crisis are gasoline. Congress considers escalation. Sources claim that by early evening, multiple congressional offices were reportedly weighing their next move. Some lawmakers, according to observers, allegedly believed the court's citation could be used to justify public oversight. Others allegedly feared it could backfire, turning the fight into a spectacle and triggering public anger. And then the word shutdown reportedly appeared in private strategy discussions, not as a certainty, not as a plan, but as a threat tool, according to some accounts, because when institutions feel cornered, they reach for leverage. And budget leverage is the sharpest knife Congress has. The stakes, according to analysts, were widening. Court pressure, DOJ scrutiny, congressional warfare, White House caution, Trump at the center, TV studios ignite by nighttime. The story reportedly hit the airwaves with that familiar fever. Anchors leaned forward. Legal analysts said phrases like, if accurate, and if the court is signaling. Panels argued about what a judge citing an FBI report might imply. Some commentators suggested it could mean the judge is testing credibility. Some suggested it could mean the judge is documenting the record to avoid accusations later. Some suggested it could mean the judge is preparing for a key decision. And then, in that loud studio chaos, one quiet truth hung in the air. Nobody knew what the next filing would contain. Nobody knew whether the DOJ would respond publicly. Nobody knew whether Congress would weaponize the moment. And that uncertainty was the crisis. The streets feel the stress. According to observers, public reaction began to spike. Social media filled with warnings, rumors, hot takes, and panic. Some people reportedly treated it like a doomsday sign, others treated it like nothing new. But in moments like this, polarization itself becomes fuel, because when half the country sees a threat and half the country sees a conspiracy, stability gets harder to maintain. And then came another late-night twist. The silence becomes the headline. By late night, some watchers reported a sudden drop in leaks, a sudden tightening of public statements, a sudden no-comment posture. And that silence, according to veteran reporters, can mean the system is bracing, either for a correction or for a surge. Because when the legal world gets quiet, it can be the calm before a filing hits like a hammer. And at that moment, one question reportedly dominated every serious conversation. If the judge cited the FBI report today, what will the judge cite next? The silence in the room was deafening. Let's stop and simplify, because the noise can make this feel impossible to follow. In simple terms, reports suggest a judge referenced an FBI report in Trump filing drama, and multiple institutions may be reacting as if legal pressure has intensified. Here are the key points, clean and clear. A new Trump-related filing reportedly surfaced with heightened legal tension. Observers claim a judge appeared to cite an FBI report, which some interpret as a serious signal. Sources suggest DOJ-linked watchers began reassessing the case posture after the citation. Capitol Hill chatter reportedly grew about hearings, subpoenas, and possible escalation. Trump's team allegedly moved into rapid response mode with mixed strategy instincts. Late rumors suggested there could be additional material referenced, though details remained unclear. Night coverage amplified public pressure, increasing risk of political and social turbulence. If names and institutions feel confusing, here's the quick map. Judge Court decides what matters in the legal record. FBI produces investigative reports and summaries that may enter filings. DOJ may rely on or challenge those materials in legal arguments. Congress may react with oversight, hearings, or political leverage. White House may try to stabilize the country while avoiding the appearance of interference. And now we move to the part everyone is waiting for, the evidence story. This is where the documentary lens tightens, because in court, the difference between noise and danger often comes down to what the record shows, not what people feel. According to legal analysts, when a judge cites an FBI report, the court may be signaling that certain investigative summaries or their contents have relevance to the arguments on the table. That does not automatically mean the FBI is right. It does not automatically mean Trump is wrong. It means the court may be treating the material as something that must be addressed. And that's a pressure spike. What kinds of evidence could be in play? Reports suggest the filing drama could be orbiting around several categories of material, often seen in high-profile cases. Court filings referencing investigative summaries, sometimes indirectly. Witness statements described through legal language, rather than direct quotes. Memos or notes that appear to document meeting timelines or conversations. Interview summaries that may be used to test consistency. Communications records described as messages, calls, or contacts without full public release. Some sources claim the citation might relate to a timeline dispute, meaning the judge could be looking at whether certain claims align with the order of events. And timeline fights are brutal, because if one timeline collapses, the strategy collapses with it. Numbers and pressure points. In high-pressure cases, analysts often track not only documents, but the ecosystem around them. Sources suggest several pressure indicators might be forming. multiple draft filings rumored to be circulating among legal teams, dozens of lawmakers reportedly discussing oversight moves in private, several media outlets assigning teams to track court updates and leaks, donor and market watchers monitoring political instability as a risk factor. Even if none of these signals are confirmed publicly, the perception of a rapidly moving situation can become self-fulfilling. The big reveal, speculative. Now here's the detail that some observers say could be the stunning twist, even if it remains unconfirmed. Reports suggest the judge's citation may point to an FBI report that allegedly contains a specific inconsistency warning, not necessarily an accusation, but a note that a statement, timeline, or recollection may not align cleanly with other records. That's the kind of detail that can set a legal room on fire because it creates two dangerous possibilities at once. Trump's opponents could argue the record supports deeper scrutiny. Trump's allies could argue the record is being used selectively or politically. And when both sides can weaponize the same document, the country tends to spiral. Why it changes everything. According to veteran court reporters, the moment a judge signals seriousness about investigative material, the conflict often shifts from public debate to institutional warfare. Because then you don't just have Trump versus the media, you have Trump versus the court's interpretation. You have DOJ facing demands to explain. You have FBI pulled into political crossfire. You have Congress tempted to intervene. And you have the White House trying to keep the country calm while everyone screams. That's the crisis. Not a single document, not a single line, but the possibility that this citation marks the beginning of a formal escalation cycle, a cycle where each response triggers the next. Court cites, legal teams counter, DOJ adjusts, Congress reacts, public pressure rises, foreign rivals watch, markets respond. And then the next filing lands. Now here's where it gets worse. If additional materials exist, follow-ups, attachments, clarifications, or competing summaries, then the next wave could arrive quickly, forcing everyone to choose a narrative before the facts are fully known. And when narratives harden early, chaos tends to win. Some people will say this is exaggerated. They'll say a judge citing a report is normal. And in many cases, that might be true. A citation can be routine. A reference can be procedural. A legal mention can be meaningless. So skepticism is reasonable. But here's why analysts still treat this as extremely serious, even with uncertainty. Because the danger isn't only in what the citation means. The danger is in how institutions react when the country is already stressed. Even if the FBI report citation is later clarified, even if it turns out to be less dramatic than the online reaction suggests, even if the filing language is misunderstood. The reaction cycle can still create real-world consequences. Congress could still weaponize the moment for oversight warfare. Trump allies could still mobilize supporters around the perception of bias. DOJ could still face pressure to respond publicly. Courts could still face credibility attacks. The public could still lose trust, which increases instability. Confirmed versus unconfirmed matters, and details remain unclear. So it's important to hold two truths at the same time. We do not have complete public certainty about what the citation implies. The potential risks remain high because escalation can happen even without certainty. That's why this is still developing, because the story isn't just the citation. The story is the pressure. And pressure, once it builds, can break systems, whether or not everyone agrees on the facts. According to observers, the immediate fallout could arrive in three directions at once: legal filings, political retaliation, and public turbulence. If the court citation continues to be treated as a major signal, analysts believe the next steps could look like this: high chance, 55%, escalating filings and louder statements, more motions, sharper language, more institution versus institution tension, medium chance, 35%, partial containment, quiet clarifications, behind-the-scenes negotiations, reduced public escalation, lower but dangerous chance, 10%. a full institutional showdown. Congress intensifies oversight, shutdown threats reemerge, foreign policy stress rises, and trust collapses faster than leaders can control. And the core reality remains: Trump stays at the center of the storm, because wherever Trump goes, institutions react. And wherever institutions react, the country feels it. If you want the next update as this develops, stay connected. Because after tonight, nothing feels untouchable anymore.